Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and to part 2 of the twin cam tensioner replacement video. In part 1, we took all this stuff apart, had to take the top end apart to get the push rods out, got the cam chest out, or got the cam plate out of it, took a look at the tensioners. They're in bad shape, so we're going to go ahead and replace them. Waiting on a few parts for that, but in the meantime, while we're doing that, we can go ahead and change out these factory inner cam bearings and put in a Timken or a much higher quality bearing. So over on the bench, I've got the tool laid out to remove and install the bearings. I'll take you over and show you that. So here's the tool and all of its various parts. It comes with attachments to do both the smaller 88 bearings and the larger 96 and 103 bearings. So these two pieces are the bearing removers. The difference is the size of the collet out here on the end where it grabs the bearing. This plate, these thumb screws, and these two things are for installing the bearings. And again, the difference is the diameter out here that sits inside the bearing. This screw here goes with the installation kit. Comes with pretty good instructions. I got this kit off of Amazon. There's a dozen places you can get it. eBay, several different sellers on Amazon. So lots of places to get it. I've used this one on my Street Glide on my 96. It worked perfectly. The instructions are very good, explain how to do every step. So if you're looking for one of these tools, eBay, Amazon, I don't remember exactly what the price was, and it's been several years since I bought it. It seems like it was around $70, $75. So, but again, I don't know what they run nowadays. A lot of things have gone up a lot over the last few years. So we'll get the right tool here, get it over on the bike, and show you how to use it. Okay, so here's what the tool looks like set up inside the case to pull the bearing out. I'll show you, once I get the bearing, the old bearing out, I'll show you over on the bench again exactly how all this goes together. But basically, okay, so here's a little bit better view of actually what's going on inside there. This is the bearing that I just pulled out of the case. As I said, this the 4-finger job here, you drive inside the bearing, just tap it in there, and this lip grabs the inside of the bearing. This collar will sit up against the case, and as you tighten this gold nut, you can see it's drawing in, and with this pressing against the case, it's going to pull the bearing out of the hole inside the case. So just like that. Okay, so here's the old bearing on the left, the new style bearing on the right. You can see if you look at the rollers inside there, how this old bearing has a cage between the rollers, or a space between each one of the rollers, and this new one does not. It's just needle next to needle. They touch each other all the way around. So this is the new style bearing that you should always put inside your twin cam anytime you're inside the cam chest. If you've got this old style bearing, you need to put the new one inside there. So these have a tendency, from what I read, of coming apart and causing a lot of problems. I feel sure that this is original. So I'll get set up with the press. Well, I can show you real quick here. Okay, so this is the collet that's going to hold the bearing, just like that. We're going to set it up with this push plate that you saw a minute ago and the jack screw. And what's going to happen is we're going to push this bearing back inside the hole inside the case. You go till this lip right here on your tool touches the inside of the case. That will seat the bearing back in flush with the hole, and that's all there is to it. Once I get them in there and I get ready to put the cam chest back together, I'll take some engine assembly lube or some engine oil and rub inside this bearing real good to get all this lubricated for initial startup. But that's how it works. One more tip while I'm thinking of it, when you press these in, they have letters, numbers, part numbers out here on the outside of them. On one side they'll have writing where the other side doesn't. When you press them in, you want the numbers facing out. So after they're installed and you look back inside the cam chest, you can still see the numbers. All right, so here's the tool all rigged up to push the bearing back into the case, the new bearing. So I went ahead and took the oil pump out because I have to reach up inside here, and this is probably about the hardest part of the whole operation. You have to reach up inside here to put the pushing adapter on there and hold the bearing straight as you crank this through the tool to get it up to the case and ready to start inside the hole. 3/4 inch socket on here, and we just turn this until the bearing bottoms out, or until the tool bottoms out against the case, which will put the bearing flush. You want to use a ratchet on this. You want to go easy. It should press in there fairly easy. I'm using 2 fingers out here on the ratchet, and it's going in easy, so I know it started in the case and going in nice and smooth. You definitely don't want to use a power tool on this, just in case something's sitting crooked in there or whatever. You're pressing against aluminum, so you can't go apey on it, because you could run the risk of breaking that aluminum case that you're pushing it into. So that's all there is to installing it. You get done with that, this hole is lined up with the rear cam bearing. So you'll just move the whole setup over to this hole and press in the rear. Okay, so that's all there is to it. You can see the new cam bearings back there in the back of the cam chest. Everything went in nice and smooth, no issues. They're nice and flush. I went till the tool bottomed out. They're both flush inside the case, and we've got our new bearings installed, so no issues. Continue on putting this thing back together. Okay, so we got some new parts ready to go back on. We've got the 2 tensioners, the primary and secondary. We've got a gasket kit. We've got the little black guide piece back here, some assembly lube. I got 3 snap rings that go on the tensioners. You only need 2 of them, but if one goes flying, you're not going to find it. So I got an extra one. This is a tool to put the inner tensioner on, and the snap ring pliers to put the snap rings on. So we're going to go ahead and get this inner one on, then we can put the cam plate and cams back in the bike. And the primary tensioner, the outer tensioner, is real easy to get to with the cam plate in the bike. So, okay, so to use this tool, this big end of the spring here sits inside this groove. I'm trying to do this through the viewfinder, so if it looks a little clunky, that's why. The tall end of that spring sits on this hook. You use this long bolt that came with it. It goes through here and hooks into these hooks on the front of the tensioner. And again, I'm trying to do this through the viewfinder, so it's hard for me to see what's happening here. So it goes just like that. Then as you tension it around, it tensions the spring. Now we can take this whole unit and set it down here in the cam plate. There, just like that. Takes a little wiggling to get it down in there, but now it's on there. You got to push it down just a little bit more to uncover that snap ring groove, and it's ready to put the snap ring on it. This is one of those jobs you just can't do without this special tool. I mean, I'm sure there's people on YouTube that have done it or say they'll show you how to do it, but you know, it's one of them jobs that if you have the tool, you see how fairly easy it was. I even had to struggle just a little bit with the tool, but I can't imagine doing it without, and not scratching up that shoe or breaking something or losing a thumbnail in the process. So get the tool. I got this one on Amazon. It was a little pricey. I think it was about 65, 70 bucks, something like that. So it's one of those tools you just got to have to do this. Okay, so one other thing. Once you get the tensioner on there, you get the snap ring in. Can you see what I'm doing? Snap ring in. I used the tensioner tool again to rotate this around, and then pinned this shoe in the released position. What that's going to do is allow me to get the cam plate back into the inner cam bearings a lot easier, because I don't know if you can see or not, but these cams have a slight bit of movement, which is normal. But if you've got the tensioner with tension on that cam, on the chain, it's going to pull these cams together, and then they're not going to line up perfectly with the inner cam bearings. You're going to have a little bit of a rough time getting it in there. With this pinned out of the way, it's going to go in there easy, and we can pull that pin out after the cam plate's back in the motor and tension this spring. So got some more cleaning to do, and then we'll be able to slide the cam plate back in the engine again. So I went ahead and put the outer cam shoe cam tensioner on here while it was on the bench. I know I said it's easy to get to in the bike, and it is, but it's even easier right here on the bench. Just make sure your snap rings are in the groove good, and you're ready to put it back in there. I don't think I showed this up close on camera before, but you can see how worn these tensioner shoes are. And this one, of course, has got the piece broke out of it. But definitely time to change them. Okay, I don't know how this is going to turn out as far as both of us being able to see in here at the same time. But like I said earlier, or I think I said earlier, we need to lube all this up with some assembly lube. You can use motor oil. I like to use assembly lube because it sticks where you put it a little bit better. So I'm going to try and get a little bit here on the end of the crankshaft, back in the oil pump just a little bit. Back here in the inner cam bearings we put in. Put a good shot back in them. Get it all over the exhaust while I'm at it. Put some on the cam bearings back, or the journals back here on the back of the cam for the bearings. Some underneath this tensioner on the chain. Now, try and slide this baby in there. O-rings are in position, got oil on them. Lifters are all up out of the way. There it is. There it is up on the dowels. All right, now I'm going to start a couple of these bolts in here just to kind of hold everything in place. Then I'm going to start my oil pump bolts. Actually, I think I'm going to run a couple of these down just finger tight to hold the plate back up on the dowels, because the book says in order to center the oil pump on the crankshaft, we need to rotate the engine. Put the oil pump bolts in, rotate it, or just finger tight on those oil pump bolts, rotate the engine around, and then snug them down. I've also got these oil pump aligning pins that I'm going to use as well. Kind of center everything. All right, so cam plate is held in. We've got the oil pump pins in there just so. Now rotate the engine around. All right, we should be good right there. And of course, now our alignment's off on our crank gear, which is okay because we can line everything up with the dots when we get it back together. So the book doesn't say anything about Loctite on any of these bolts, which I assume they just don't want Loctite inside the engine, which makes sense. You want to tighten all these bolts whenever you're torquing stuff like this that has multiple bolts in it. You want to tighten them in a crisscross or a star pattern. I've got these just finger tight. Go ahead and take my alignment dowels out of the way now. These are pretty neat if you haven't seen them. It's just a tapered screw there. And here on the these 4 bolts around the oil pump, they're actually numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's a number stamped into the cam support plate there. I'll get my torque wrench and start torquing all this down. 90 to 120 inch-pounds on these outside bolts that hold the cam plate in. I'll have to look in the book again and see what the spec is on these oil pump bolts. I'll put the torque spec here on the screen for you. You know what? All right, got everything torqued down. Getting ready to make sure the timing marks line up. The book says to put the crank gear with the dot facing up, the cam gear with the dot facing down, and then to rotate everything around and see if they line up. I've got my crank dot lined up with the dot on the oil pump, but my cam gear is off 1 tooth. It's facing to the rear 1 tooth. So I'm going to try and take this apart without moving anything and get the cam turned 1 tooth. I say without moving anything, I mean without rotating the crankshaft. All right, so we got them lined up this time. So the book does talk about putting Loctite on the crank bolt and the cam bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and get these bolts cleaned up, put some Loctite on them, get them in and torque them down to, let's see, red Loctite, tighten the crank and primary cam sprocket flange bolts to 22 to 24 foot-pounds. We're going to need that locking tool. Once I get these bolts in there and kind of finger tight to take all the slack out of everything, we're going to put this. So the locking tool that I talked about earlier is this tool right here. Once we get the bolts in here and finger tight so the gears don't move, we're going to stuff that guy right in there. I may have it upside down. We're going to stuff it in here between the gears, and that's going to keep either one from turning while we torque the cam bolt and the crank bolt down to 22 to 24 foot-pounds. All right, bolts are torqued down. We've still lined up there on the dots. I'll try and get you in where you can see that. I know it looks strange with that line, but it's kind of an optical illusion the way the camera's angled. We can see by putting that straight edge across that we're lined up with both dots. Let me get the light over here on this side. You can see the white tooth there and the dot on the cam gear up here are lined up, so we're good to go there. I'm going to put a little lube on this tensioner pad so it's not starting out dry. And before I put the cover back on, I'm going to go over the chain and everything else to make sure it's all got a good coat of assembly lube on it. All right, so she's tensioned. She's in time. We got everything torqued down under here. So now, all right, we got the cam chest back together. We've triple, quadruple checked that everything's torqued and that the timing marks are still lined up. We've got the pushrod tubes back in. I went ahead and changed all the O-rings for the pushrod tubes, and we're getting her together. We got to drop the pushrods in. You remember that we marked them and laid them out as to where they go when we took it apart. So put the pushrods right back where they came from, and then we'll be ready to set the rockers back on it and torque those down. Lines that we painted on them. Getting ready to put the rocker assemblies back in. One thing you want to make sure you do is this hole right here. You want to blow it out with compressed air before you put the bolt in. The reason being, that's a blind hole. The bottom of the hole doesn't go anywhere. So if oil gets down in that hole while the bolt's out, and then you try and thread the bolt in, you can actually cause a hydraulic force down there with the oil and blow out the bottom of the casting on the bottom of the head. And then you'll have an oil leak there. So very important, just take some compressed air, give it a little spritz, and whatever oil's in there will blow up out of it. You'll be all set. Also going to put assembly lube on the push rods and the valves before I set the rocker assembly back on there. We've got it over here on the bench. Here in the breather assembly, lots of gaskets to scrape. I've already scraped those off. Of course, these are the new ones. New umbrella valve in it, new filter underneath. So getting ready to set the rockers back in there. Once I get all that in there and these torqued down, I'll go ahead and start putting the breather assembly back together on top of the head. Got the rocker assembly back on. The bolts are just snug down right now. I'm going to go through and torque them. 15 to 18 foot-pounds on these 4 bolts that hold the rocker assembly to the head. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the torque sequence. And once you get these outside 4 torqued down, then we go back to the breather and torque it down. 90 to 120 inch-pounds on these 2 breather bolts. At that point, with everything torqued down, it's time to put the valve cover back on and put the 6 bolts back in it. Okay, front cylinder's all done, valve cover's on. The book does say to put a dab of Loctite on the 6 valve cover bolts. Those get torqued down to 9 to 12 foot-pounds. In a crisscross pattern, of course, starting with those center 2 bolts and then crisscross with the outer 4. We need to roll the engine over now to get the rear cylinder cam on the base circle, or the lifters on the base circle, so both of the push rods are all the way down. Once we get that done, we can put the rear rocker assembly in just like we did the front. Okay, we got everything back together. Everything went fine going back together, no issues or hiccups or anything. I've left the spark plugs out of it for now. Once I get the electronics back on it, basically once the paint work is done and we get everything back together where I can turn it over with the switch, I'm going to turn it over for a minute or whatever, get some oil pumped through the system, get some oil pressure built, and then go ahead and put the plugs back in it and fire it up. But I just rolled the engine over by hand by the rear tire, felt for compression on both cylinders. We've got good compression, so we know our valve train is all working correctly and don't have any issues there. We've got a good pile of parts here, old parts that we've changed out, the tensioners, the inner cam bearings, the breather assemblies, gaskets, O-rings. So this has been a pretty simple job, really. There's a lot of steps to it, a lot of stuff to take apart as far as, you know, the valve train and whatever. There's a simpler way to do it, but you have to buy adjustable push rods. You can go in here and raise the push rod tubes up, cut the one-piece push rods and take them out that way to slacken your valve train. Then you don't have to take the rockers apart or the valve covers off or anything like that. You can do it with the gas tank on the bike and everything else. But like I said, you end up having to buy adjustable push rods, which are a little bit pricey. So on my Street Glide, when I did it, I did the cut the old push rods thing and buy adjustables. And on this one, as you just saw, I decided to take the whole thing apart the factory way, I guess you could say. But not a bad job. Definitely something you need to do on these twin cam 88s. We've already talked about how those tensioner shoes wear out pretty quick on these. So if you've got a twin cam 88, definitely something to check around 15, 20,000 miles, I'd say, just to get an idea of where they're at. If you have a 96 or a 103, they've upgraded the system on those. I've got a video on that on my channel too, on the Street Glide. Check that out if you're interested in the 96 and 103 setup. If you guys watched this long, I really appreciate it. Check out the other videos on this channel for more maintenance and repairs, modifications, upgrades, things like that. And I also have another new channel, or a new channel, I should say. It's called A Man on a Motorcycle. On that channel, we're going to take the camera, go on some motorcycle rides, do some reviews of products, things like that, some vlogs. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, please check out that channel. It's called A Man on a Motorcycle, and I'll also put a link to that channel down in the description of this video. If you would check that out and tell me what you think, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks very much, and you all have a great day.